I remember the exact moment I started to question everything I thought I knew about healthy eating. It was a late afternoon in autumn, just after lunch, and I was sitting at my desk, fighting to stay awake. I had eaten what most people would call a clean, balanced meal: grilled chicken, some brown rice, steamed broccoli, no soda, no dessert, no processed junk. And yet, less than an hour later, I felt like someone had pulled the plug on my energy. My heart rate fluttered slightly. My eyelids grew heavy. I reached for my water bottle with a sense of dread, wondering if I was about to crash again. At that point in my life, this wasn't a rare event. It was becoming my new normal. The scary part? I wasn't diabetic. My labs were within range, or so I was told. But something was clearly off. I began to notice these episodes of sudden fatigue, foggy thinking, and mood shifts happening more often, especially after meals. I would wake up clear-headed and optimistic. Then by mid-morning or after lunch, I felt as though a cloud had moved in. One day, out of frustration, I started tracking my glucose. What I found shocked me. Despite eating clean and exercising, my blood sugar was swinging wildly. It wasn't extreme enough to be diagnosed, but it was certainly enough to wreck my quality of life. What I came to understand over time was this: unstable blood sugar isn't just a precursor to diabetes. It's a slow drain on every system in your body. It affects your brain, your sleep, your weight, your hormones, your ability to concentrate, even your emotional resilience. The worst part is, it often hides behind the mask of normal aging. People shrug it off as getting older, when in fact, it's something we can manage sometimes. Reverse if we know where to look. For me, that turning point began not in a doctor's office, but in my own kitchen. Through research, experimentation, and years of guiding patients, I discovered that the key wasn't another supplement or fad diet. It was understanding how different foods, combinations, and timing impact our metabolic rhythm. And believe it or not, one of the most powerful tools I found wasn't exotic or expensive. It was a simple fruit, one most of us walk past in the grocery store without giving it a second thought. In this series, I'm going to show you how that fruit, paired with a few smart shifts in how we eat and move, can make a profound difference in your energy, clarity, and long-term health. This isn't about shortcuts or empty promises. It's about real biology, real results, and real hope. And I promise you this: once you understand how to stabilize your blood sugar naturally, you'll wonder why no one ever taught you this before. Let me tell you something that most people, especially those over 40, rarely hear from their doctors. You can stabilize your blood sugar naturally without medication, and without putting yourself on a joyless, restrictive diet. That realization hit me like a freight train, because for years I thought I had to choose between quality of life and health. I was told to cut carbs, fear fruit, and accept that fatigue was simply part of aging. But none of that sat right with me. And as it turns out, science was on my side. When I began diving into the research and tracking real-world outcomes in my practice, a pattern emerged. One specific fruit kept showing up in the data, not just because it was low on the glycemic index, but because of its fiber composition, antioxidant profile, and how it interacted with insulin receptors. The more I studied it, the more fascinated I became. This wasn't some exotic superfood flown in from halfway across the world. It was a fruit that grows in many backyards across America and has been used in traditional medicine systems for generations. But here's the problem. Even though it's widely available, most people overlook it. They don't know how to prepare it, when to eat it, or why it matters. And that's why this next part is so important. In this series, I'm going to walk you through the what, when, and how of using this fruit to your advantage. I'll also share the core principles that make it so effective not just for blood sugar, but for inflammation, digestion, and even immune support. And at the very end, I'm going to share a strategy that ties everything together, a method I've seen transform the energy, sleep, and metabolism of hundreds of patients. But for that to make sense, we need to start with the most critical step: understanding why our blood sugar gets thrown off in the first place, even when we think we're eating healthy. There was a season in my life when I thought I was doing everything right. I exercised 5 days a week. I ate what the experts called clean. I didn't smoke, barely drank, and slept a decent 7 hours most nights. And yet, I was exhausted. I carried stubborn weight around my midsection that refused to budge. My skin lost its glow, my joints ached more than they should, and my moods began to swing in ways I couldn't explain. For a while, I chalked it up to stress or age. After all, I was in my early 50s. Wasn't this just part of getting older? That illusion was shattered the day I took my blood glucose monitor and noticed a pattern. My fasting levels were slightly elevated. My post-meal readings spiked higher than expected. And more importantly, they stayed elevated far longer than they should have. That was my first real encounter with what I now call the silent saboteur: blood sugar dysregulation. It's one of the most underestimated threats to long-term health because it hides behind normal lab results. It slowly chips away at your vitality without announcing itself until damage is well underway. You don't need to be diabetic for it to erode your life. In fact, millions of Americans are walking around with impaired insulin sensitivity and don't even know it. Their doctors tell them their numbers are normal, but they still feel tired, foggy, and inflamed. That's because insulin resistance begins quietly, often years before a diagnosis. The cells become numb to insulin's signal, so the pancreas pumps out more. And over time, this compensation breaks down. That's when people notice the real fallout: weight gain, cravings, poor sleep, blurry vision, belly fat, and brain fog. And the scary part? It doesn't take candy or soda to get there. It happens even with healthy carbs, even with fruit, even with brown rice or whole wheat toast if your system is already struggling. That's why understanding the roots of blood sugar imbalance is essential, not just for prevention, but for restoration. The good news is, once you can see the pattern, you can break it. And that's what we're going to do together, starting with the biology behind this silent breakdown. I still remember the first time I truly looked at a guava not just as a tropical snack, but as a potential tool for metabolic recovery. It wasn't in a research lab or clinic. It was in a small grocery store tucked into a quiet suburb. And there they were, plump, pink, unassuming. At that moment, I didn't realize I was staring at one of the most underrated allies in blood sugar control. Most people walk right past guava without a second thought. Some have never even tasted it. But when I began digging into the data, what I found shocked me. Guava isn't just another low-sugar fruit. It's rich in soluble fiber, particularly pectin, which helps slow the absorption of carbohydrates and delays gastric emptying. This alone makes it incredibly helpful in flattening the post-meal glucose spike. But that's just the beginning. Guava is also loaded with antioxidants like vitamin C and flavonoids, which combat oxidative stress, a key driver of insulin resistance. One study conducted in East Asia followed individuals with borderline glucose levels who consumed guava or guava leaf tea regularly. Over a few months, not only did their fasting glucose improve, but their insulin sensitivity markers shifted in a favorable direction. In my own practice, I saw this echoed time and again. Clients who included guava as part of a well-balanced meal noticed fewer sugar crashes, more sustained energy, and improved focus. What's most remarkable is that guava delivers these benefits without spiking glucose, unlike many fruits that are rich in natural sugars. And because of its fiber, it tends to promote satiety, helping to curb cravings that often lead people off track. I started using guava personally after lunch and saw the difference in my continuous glucose monitor within days. No massive spikes, no mid-afternoon slumps, Just a calm, steady curve that told me my body was finally getting the support it needed. So why isn't guava talked about more? In part, because it doesn't have a big marketing engine behind it. There's no billion-dollar industry pushing guava pills or powders. It's just a humble fruit, natural, whole, and quietly powerful. But that's exactly why it works. It doesn't override your biology. It works with it. In the next section, I'm going to show you how timing makes all the difference. Even the healthiest food, taken at the wrong time, can have unintended effects. So let's dig into the art of when to eat and why guava, used strategically, can be a metabolic game changer. There's a certain kind of frustration that builds when you feel like you're doing everything right and your body still doesn't respond. I remember that feeling all too well. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was emotional erosion. I felt like I was failing at being healthy, like my best efforts were being thrown into a void with no return. I wasn't eating junk. I was moving my body, drinking water, even meditating. But somehow, my energy kept crashing. My motivation began to waver. And worst of all, I started to believe that maybe this was just the inevitable decline that comes with age. That belief, more than anything, kept me stuck. What turned things around wasn't some flashy new product or miracle cure. It was the moment I decided to stop outsourcing my power and start reconnecting with the signals my body had been giving me all along. That's when guava entered the picture, not as a magic bullet, but as a key that helped unlock a door I didn't realize was closed. You see, when you eat something that actually works with your biology instead of against it, the results can feel surprisingly immediate. I began to feel steadier after meals. My sugar crashes lessened. I stopped needing caffeine just to make it through the afternoon. Guava became a symbol to me not because it fixed everything, but because it reminded me that nature has given us tools we've forgotten how to use. When combined with mindful eating, movement, and sleep, that one shift gave me the momentum to believe change was possible again. And belief is powerful. Once you believe that your body can heal, you begin to act differently. You become more curious, more patient, more forgiving. You stop chasing hacks and start building habits. That's what I want for you. Not a temporary fix, but a real, grounded confidence that your body is capable of change. Guava may seem simple, but it carries a kind of quiet intelligence that aligns beautifully with how our systems were designed to function. As we move into the next piece, I'm going to show you how the structure of your meals, especially how you combine certain foods, can either support or sabotage that healing process. When you understand the synergy between fiber, protein, and healthy fat, you'll see why guava fits perfectly into the bigger picture. This is where we begin building not just better meals, but a better relationship with your own biology. One of the most frustrating things I hear from patients is this: "But I eat healthy. Why is my blood sugar still all over the place?" I get it, because I used to ask the same question. I was choosing the foods that were labeled clean, natural, low-fat, even organic. I was eating fruit, whole grains, and so-called superfoods. And yet, my energy was unpredictable, and my glucose monitor showed patterns I couldn't explain. That's when I realized the problem wasn't just what I was eating, but how my body was processing it. You see, not all carbohydrates are created equal. And not all healthy foods behave the same way once they're inside your system. That's where the concept of glycemic index and glycemic load comes in. The glycemic index measures how quickly a particular food causes your blood sugar to rise. But the glycemic load considers both the quality and quantity of the carbs. It's like comparing a shot of espresso to an entire pot of drip coffee. Both have caffeine, but one hits harder and faster. I started experimenting by pairing high GI foods with sources of fiber, protein, or fat, and the results were dramatic. For instance, instead of eating a banana on its own, I added a tablespoon of chia seeds and a dollop of full-fat Greek yogurt. The difference in how I felt and what the glucose monitor showed was night and day. The peak was flatter, the crash never came, and I stayed full for hours. That's when I began to understand food synergy. A single ingredient isn't the whole story. It's how ingredients work together that determines the metabolic response. Guava fits into this equation beautifully. Because it's rich in soluble fiber, it acts almost like a brake pedal on carbohydrate digestion. When I eat it after a carb-heavy meal, say, a bowl of brown rice and roasted veggies, it helps slow the release of glucose into the bloodstream, giving my body more time to respond. It's subtle, but powerful. And when you repeat that pattern meal after meal, it adds up to more stable energy, fewer cravings, and less inflammation. So if you've been eating all the right foods but still feel off, it might not be your food, it might be the way you're combining it. In the next part, I want to talk about a meal that often gets overlooked but sets the tone for your entire day. Breakfast. Done wrong, it can spike your blood sugar before you even leave the house. Done right, it can anchor your energy, stabilize your mood, and curb afternoon cravings before they begin. For years, I unknowingly sabotaged my entire day in the first 30 minutes of waking up. I thought I was making healthy choices, starting my mornings with a bowl of whole grain cereal, almond milk, maybe a banana, and a cup of coffee. It looked clean. It felt light. But by mid-morning, I was crashing hard, tired, distracted, craving something sweet. I blamed stress, poor sleep, even aging. What I didn't realize was that my blood sugar had spiked sky high and was now plummeting. That roller coaster ride started with my breakfast. You see, mornings are when our cortisol levels are naturally elevated, helping us wake up and get going. When we eat high sugar or high GI foods during this time, especially without protein or fat, we trigger an exaggerated insulin response. That creates a quick spike and a steep crash. Over time, this disrupts your metabolic rhythm, increases hunger hormones, and sets the stage for cravings that follow you into the afternoon. Once I understood this, I flipped my breakfast completely. I started anchoring my mornings with meals that had fiber, protein, and healthy fat. One of my go-to options became a chia and flaxseed pudding made with full-fat Greek yogurt, topped with half a guava sliced fresh. The fiber helped slow digestion. The protein kept me satisfied. The guava added not just flavor, but a steadying effect on glucose. The result? I stayed focused. I didn't need a second coffee. I stopped thinking about food until lunch. This shift was huge, not just for me, but for my patients too. I had one client, a teacher in her 60s, who kept crashing during her morning classes. Once we restructured her breakfast, her clarity returned, her headaches disappeared, and her students noticed the difference. It wasn't a drastic overhaul, just a smarter structure. The takeaway is simple. Your breakfast doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to work with your biology, not against it. In the next section, we're going to take this one step further, because what you do after a meal is just as important as what's on your plate. A short walk might sound trivial, but when it comes to blood sugar, it can change everything. It still amazes me how something as simple as standing up and moving your body after a meal can shift your entire metabolic response. I learned this lesson not in a textbook, but from a frustrating month where I felt like I was doing everything right, eating balanced meals, cutting processed foods, drinking plenty of water, and still, my blood sugar would spike after lunch. It wasn't until I began walking for 10 minutes after eating that the pattern changed. Not just a leisurely stroll on a weekend, but a deliberate daily practice. Here's why it matters so much. After you eat, your body begins breaking down carbohydrates into glucose, which enters the bloodstream. Your pancreas releases insulin to help shuttle that glucose into your cells. But if you're sedentary, especially after a larger meal, your muscles aren't using that fuel efficiently. Instead, it builds up in your blood. Now here's the magic part. When you move your muscles, even with a slow walk, you open up a different pathway that doesn't rely on insulin. It's called non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake, and it means your body can clear blood sugar more effectively without needing as much insulin. In my case, just walking around the block after lunch flattened my glucose spikes by nearly 25%. I felt less sluggish. My mind was clearer. I wasn't fighting that familiar crash at 2 in the afternoon. It became more than just a habit, it became a ritual. That short post-meal walk turned into a pause, a reset, a moment to breathe. And it wasn't just me. One of my clients, a retired librarian, started walking her dog for 10 minutes after dinner. Within 3 weeks, her fasting glucose dropped, and she began sleeping through the night for the first time in years. It doesn't take a gym. It doesn't require fancy gear. All it takes is movement. Gentle, consistent, intentional movement. Think of it as part of the meal, not an afterthought, but an active choice to support what you just gave your body. As we continue, I want to show you the next hidden lever, one that doesn't involve exercise at all. It's something you already eat, but probably not in the right way or amount: fiber. Combined with hydration, it forms one of the most powerful internal shields against blood sugar spikes, and the science behind it is remarkable. Have you ever finished a healthy meal, only to find yourself hungry again an hour later? That used to happen to me all the time, and it drove me crazy. I was eating salads, grilled veggies, even oatmeal with fruit, and yet I still felt unsatisfied, sometimes even shaky or irritable. I assumed it was stress or hormones, but in reality, I was missing a key ingredient: fiber. Not just any fiber, but the kind that actually forms a gel-like substance in your gut-soluble fiber. This type of fiber slows digestion, softens the glucose surge, and helps food stay in your system just long enough to fuel you steadily. But here's the catch. Fiber doesn't work alone. It needs water. Without enough hydration, fiber becomes bulk, not function. It doesn't swell. It doesn't slow. It doesn't protect. Once I began combining high-fiber foods with proper hydration, something shifted. My blood sugar curves smoothed out. My hunger between meals disappeared. My digestion improved dramatically. And perhaps most surprisingly, my mental clarity deepened. I started calling fiber and water my invisible shield, working quietly behind the scenes to create stability from the inside out. I remember one client in her 70s who kept struggling with cravings despite eating clean. When we looked at her diet, it was low in soluble fiber and even lower in water. Once we made simple swaps, adding flax, chia, guava slices, and a full glass of water after meals, her appetite normalized. She told me, "For the first time in years, I feel full without feeling heavy." That's the power of fiber done right. And when you layer in a bit of healthy fat and protein, the effect multiplies. Think of a smoothie with Greek yogurt, chia, avocado, and guava. It's not just satisfying, it's strategic. You're layering tools that speak your body's language. In the next section, I want to focus in on one of those tools: protein. It's often misunderstood, but when used wisely, it becomes one of the most powerful levers you have to regulate blood sugar, maintain muscle, and stay full in a way that transforms your relationship with food. I used to think I was eating enough protein until I realized I was mistaking snacks for sustenance. A few nuts here, a bit of yogurt there, maybe some chicken at dinner. But in truth, my meals were dominated by carbs and greens, leaving protein as an afterthought. And the result? I was hungry all the time. I couldn't make it from breakfast to lunch without reaching for something extra. My muscles felt weaker, and I struggled to stay focused. What I didn't understand then was that protein isn't just about building muscle. It's one of the most powerful regulators of blood sugar we have. When you include enough high-quality protein in your meals, it slows the rate at which food empties from your stomach, keeps you satisfied longer, and reduces the insulin spike that usually follows a carb-heavy dish. It also preserves lean muscle mass, which is crucial for metabolic health, especially as we age. I had one client in her late 60s who came to me frustrated. She ate clean, walked daily, but couldn't lose belly fat and felt drained by mid-afternoon. When we reviewed her food log, her protein intake was barely half of what her body needed. Once we bumped up her intake, adding eggs at breakfast, lentils at lunch, and salmon or turkey at dinner, her cravings disappeared. Her energy returned. And within weeks, her glucose readings leveled out. My own go-to is a bowl of full-fat Greek yogurt paired with sliced guava and a sprinkle of pumpkin seeds. The yogurt gives me protein and fat. The guava offers fiber and antioxidants. Together, it's not just food, it's fuel. The key is consistency. You don't need massive portions, but you do need regular, reliable sources of protein throughout your day. It stabilizes your blood sugar, supports your muscles, and curbs the kind of hunger that leads to impulsive eating. In the next part, we'll talk about a misunderstood nutrient that many still fear: fat. But not all fats are created equal, and the right ones can work hand in hand with protein and fiber to create meals that heal instead of harm. For the longest time, I avoided fat like it was poison. I bought everything labeled low-fat or fat-free, cooked with sprays instead of oils, and felt guilty any time I reached for avocado or full-fat anything. I thought I was being smart, protecting my heart, trimming my waist. But over time, something strange happened. I was constantly hungry. My skin looked dull. I felt moody and tired, especially after meals. It wasn't until I studied nutrition more deeply and tracked my own blood sugar that I realized what I was missing. Fat isn't the enemy. The right kinds of fat are essential allies, especially when it comes to blood sugar. When you pair healthy fats with fiber and protein, you slow the digestion process, reduce the glycemic impact of a meal, and create a buffer that protects your insulin response. Beyond that, fats support hormone production, nourish brain function, and reduce systemic inflammation. That last part matters more than most people realize, because chronic inflammation is a hidden driver of insulin resistance. I began reintroducing fat thoughtfully into my meals. Extra virgin olive oil on salads, half an avocado with lunch, a few walnuts in my guava and yogurt bowl. The difference was remarkable. I stayed full longer. My mental fog lifted. My glucose readings smoothed out. One client in her 70s who had been stuck in the low-fat mindset for decades made the same shift. Within a month, her snacking dropped by half, her joints hurt less, and her energy in the evenings returned. She told me, "I can't believe fat was the thing I needed all along. We've been taught to fear fat, but the truth is, fat, when chosen wisely, can be one of the most stabilizing nutrients in your toolkit. And when combined with guava's fiber and natural antioxidants, it's not just a meal, it's medicine." In the next section, we'll look at a hidden villain that sneaks into even the healthiest kitchens. It wears many names, hides in innocent packages, and quietly undoes all your best intentions. Added sugar. Let's pull back the curtain. For the longest time, I told myself I didn't eat much sugar. I didn't drink soda. I avoided desserts. I even skipped sweeteners in my coffee. So when my blood sugar was still erratic, I felt defeated. But then I started reading labels, really reading them, and I was stunned. The granola I thought was clean had cane syrup. The salad dressing I loved contained honey and fruit juice concentrate. Even the almond milk in my fridge had added sugar. That's when I realized the problem wasn't just sugar in the obvious forms, it was the sugar hiding in places we don't expect. These hidden sugars go by many names: dextrose, maltose, evaporated cane juice, corn syrup solids. They're added to enhance taste, texture, or shelf life, but they hit your bloodstream just like table sugar, fast and hard. And because they're often paired with low-fat or healthy branding, we don't suspect them. One client of mine thought she was doing everything right. She bought organic soups, flavored yogurts, even gluten-free bread, but her energy was all over the place. When we reviewed the ingredients, every item had at least one form of added sugar. We swapped them out for Whole Foods plain Greek yogurt with guava and cinnamon, homemade dressings with olive oil and lemon, and unsweetened almond milk. Within 2 weeks, her cravings eased. Her mood stabilized. And for the first time, she felt like she was back in control. The lesson here is not about fear, it's about awareness. Food manufacturers are brilliant at disguising sugar under different names. But once you learn to spot them, you get your power back. You don't need to obsess or go sugar-free. But when you choose natural sweetness from fruit like guava, rich in fiber and antioxidants, you're fueling your body instead of tricking it. As we move into the next section, I want to shift our attention to what we drink, because sometimes the most sugar we consume isn't on our plates, it's in our cups. For years, I thought of water as just a background detail, something I drank when I was thirsty or after a workout. I never imagined it had anything to do with my blood sugar. But once I started monitoring my glucose more closely, I noticed something strange. On days when I drank less water, my blood sugar stayed elevated longer, even after meals I knew were balanced. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. But when it kept happening, I dug deeper. What I found changed everything. When you're even mildly dehydrated, your blood becomes more concentrated. That means glucose levels appear higher, and insulin has a harder time moving efficiently through the bloodstream to do its job. It's like trying to stir syrup through cold molasses. Everything slows down. One client of mine, a retired nurse, came to me frustrated. She was eating clean, walking daily, and taking her supplements, but still felt foggy and inflamed. When I asked about hydration, she shrugged. I drink when I'm thirsty. We did a simple experiment, adding 2 full glasses of water first thing in the morning and 1 with each meal. Within a week, her fasting glucose dropped, her digestion improved, and she stopped having that dry mouth fatigue by mid-afternoon. Staying hydrated isn't just about avoiding thirst. It's about creating the environment your body needs to metabolize efficiently. And when you pair hydration with high-fiber foods like guava, you get a double benefit. The fiber expands and slows digestion, while the water helps distribute glucose more evenly. I now treat hydration like a prescription. A glass of water before a meal, a thermos by my desk. A gentle reminder that supporting your biology doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be consistent. As we move forward, I want to explore a factor that's less about what we eat or drink and more about how we feel, because stress, even in the absence of food, can spike your blood sugar faster than any candy bar. Let's talk about cortisol, your body's hidden glucose trigger. I'll never forget the day I checked my blood sugar before breakfast, just out of curiosity, and it was elevated. I hadn't eaten anything. I'd slept a full 8 hours. Everything should have been normal. But then I remembered the night before. I had stayed up late answering emails, worrying about a family issue, and mentally rehearsing every possible outcome. My body hadn't rested. It had been in fight or flight mode all night. That's when I realized how profoundly stress impacts blood sugar, even in the absence of food. When we're stressed, our body releases cortisol, a hormone designed to help us survive danger. It tells the liver to release stored glucose for energy, just in case we need to run or fight. But when that stress isn't physical danger, but instead emails, finances, or family conflict, the glucose has nowhere to go. It lingers in the bloodstream, and because it wasn't triggered by food, insulin doesn't always respond effectively. I started noticing this pattern with clients too. One woman in her 50s followed every nutrition suggestion to the letter, but her glucose readings were erratic. When we talked more, it became clear that her life was running on constant low-grade anxiety. Once she began integrating breathwork, short walks, and daily journaling, her numbers began to stabilize. Her food didn't change, her nervous system did. Stress doesn't just feel bad. It alters our internal chemistry. It skews hormones, disrupts digestion, spikes cravings, and reduces insulin sensitivity. And unlike food or exercise, stress is invisible, which makes it even more dangerous. I've learned to treat stress reduction not as a luxury, but as medicine. A few minutes of deep breathing before meals, 5 minutes of sunlight in the morning, a pause between tasks. These aren't indulgences, they're interventions. In the next section, we'll explore something that pairs beautifully with stress reduction, a habit that repairs from the inside out, night after night: sleep. And the way it interacts with blood sugar might surprise you. I used to think sleep just affected my mood. If I didn't sleep well, I'd be cranky, maybe a little foggy. But I never imagined it could be the reason my blood sugar was spiraling out of control. That changed the day I wore a continuous glucose monitor and saw my morning numbers creeping up on nights when I slept poorly. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, and the science backed it up. When we don't get enough deep restorative sleep, our body becomes less sensitive to insulin. That means the same meal that kept our glucose steady yesterday could spike us today simply because we're sleep deprived. But it doesn't stop there. Sleep deprivation also throws off hunger hormones. It increases ghrelin, which stimulates appetite, and decreases leptin, which tells us we're full. So we wake up not just tired, but craving carbs, comfort foods, and quick hits of energy. I've seen this over and over with clients. One woman in her late 50s kept slipping up with nighttime snacking. When we looked deeper, it wasn't willpower. It was exhaustion. Her sleep was fragmented. Her mind never shut off. Once we worked on her sleep hygiene, dimming lights after dinner, avoiding screens, adding magnesium, and a short evening walk, her blood sugar stabilized and her cravings nearly vanished. I've had to learn this lesson myself, too. These days, I treat sleep like medicine. I guard my bedtime the way I used to guard my workouts. I create a wind-down routine that signals my body it's safe to let go. Because the truth is, you can eat the cleanest food, move your body every day, and take all the right supplements, but if your sleep is chaotic, your system won't heal. Sleep is where your hormones recalibrate. It's where your blood sugar resets, and it's where your nervous system finds peace. As we continue, I want to introduce you to a surprising ally in this healing process. A simple, natural tonic that works beautifully when used at the right time. Apple cider vinegar. And how you take it makes all the difference. I used to roll my eyes when people mentioned apple cider vinegar. It sounded like one of those trendy health hacks that promised too much and delivered little. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to test it not just by feel, but with real data. I drank a tablespoon diluted in water about 10 minutes before a carb-heavy dinner, then tracked my glucose. The result? My post-meal spike was nearly 30% lower than usual. I repeated the experiment several times. Same meal, same portion, same timing. And the difference held steady. That's when I started paying attention to the science. Apple cider vinegar works in a few key ways. First, it helps delay gastric emptying, which means your stomach releases food into your intestines more slowly. That slows down how quickly glucose enters your bloodstream. Second, it appears to increase insulin sensitivity, especially in people with mild resistance. And third, it may reduce the activity of certain enzymes that break down carbohydrates too quickly. The combined effect is a flatter glucose curve and more stable energy. I started sharing this with clients, especially those who felt frustrated despite clean eating. One man in his early 60s had stubborn post-meal spikes no matter how balanced his plate looked. We added diluted apple cider vinegar before lunch and dinner. Within 2 weeks, his readings improved and his afternoon fatigue faded. It's not magic, and it's not a replacement for a smart meal, but it's a powerful tool when used wisely. I always recommend taking it diluted, never straight, and ideally right before or during a meal that includes carbohydrates. I pair it with warm water and sometimes a splash of lemon. It's not about taste, it's about effect. That small habit has become one of my secret weapons, especially on travel days or when meals are heavier than usual. As we continue, I want to show you another category of natural allies ingredients hiding in your spice rack that do far more than flavor your food. They speak to your metabolism in ancient, intelligent ways, and they may already be in your kitchen. There was a time when I thought spices were just for flavor. A sprinkle of cinnamon on oatmeal, a dash of turmeric in curry, a slice of ginger in tea. That's it. But when I started diving deeper into glucose science, something shifted. I came across study after study linking certain spices to better blood sugar regulation. At first, I was skeptical, but the evidence was compelling. Cinnamon, for instance, contains a compound called cinnamaldehyde, which has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity and slow the breakdown of carbohydrates in the gut. Turmeric offers curcumin, a powerful anti-inflammatory that can reduce insulin resistance at the cellular level. And ginger? It contains gingerol, which helps improve digestion and reduce oxidative stress, two major contributors to unstable glucose. I began experimenting. I added cinnamon to my morning smoothie. I sipped turmeric tea in the evening. I tossed fresh ginger into stir-fries and soups. Within weeks, I noticed fewer cravings, steadier energy, and a sense of balance I hadn't felt in years. One of my clients, a retired teacher, struggled with late-night blood sugar spikes. We tried everything. Eventually, we added cinnamon to her dinner routine, just a quarter teaspoon in a warm beverage. The change was subtle but steady. Her morning readings improved. She felt more rested. These ingredients aren't just seasoning, they're signaling. They tell your body to calm inflammation, to use insulin more wisely, to digest food with grace instead of urgency. And the best part? They're already in your kitchen. Healing doesn't always require a prescription. Sometimes, it starts with paying attention to what you sprinkle, sip, and stir. As we look ahead, I want to shift our focus from what's on our plate to what's in our mind, because emotional patterns, especially guilt and shame around food, can sabotage even the best intentions. Let's explore the healing power of forgiveness. For a long time, I believed I deserved every bad glucose reading after a bad meal. If I indulged in dessert, skipped a workout, or ate out of stress, I'd tell myself, well, you earned this spike. I thought guilt would keep me accountable. I thought shame was discipline. But I was wrong. I've since learned that shame doesn't lead to better choices. It leads to more stress, more erratic blood sugar, and more disconnect from your body. When we feel guilt or regret around food, our stress hormones rise. Cortisol floods our system. Digestion slows. Insulin becomes less effective. And the cycle repeats. I saw this pattern in myself. I saw it in clients. One woman in her 60s tracked every bite she ate. After a slice of birthday cake, she'd fast for 18 hours. Not because she was full, but because she felt like she had to pay a debt. Her glucose became unpredictable. Her joy around meals disappeared. When we reframed her thinking, seeing food not as morality but information, everything changed. She began making choices from self-respect instead of self-punishment. Her stress levels dropped. Her digestion improved. And, ironically, her blood sugar became more stable. Forgiveness isn't just spiritual, it's biochemical. It softens your nervous system, supports better digestion, and calms the hormonal chaos that spikes glucose. You can't heal in a body you resent. You can't regulate what you constantly punish. Real transformation starts with grace, with saying, I'm learning, instead of, I messed up again. I've come to believe that one of the most powerful things we can do for our health isn't a new supplement or meal plan, it's choosing to speak to ourselves with compassion. As we near the end of this journey, there's one more piece I want to share. It's the missing link that ties all of this together, the quiet but profound strength found in community. I spent years trying to do it all on my own. I researched, I tracked, I analyzed every bite, every symptom, every glucose reading. I thought if I just got the formula right, everything would fall into place. But what I didn't realize was that isolation itself was affecting my health. The stress of doing it alone, of having no one to talk to when the numbers didn't make sense, created a silent pressure that no meal plan could fix. I see this in so many people, especially those who pride themselves on being strong, independent, self-reliant. But healing, true healing, isn't a solo act. One of my clients, a widower in his 70s, had struggled with unstable glucose for years. He did everything right on paper but still felt off. What changed everything was joining a local walking group. It wasn't just the movement, it was the laughter, the shared stories, the feeling of being seen. Within weeks, his energy lifted, his sleep deepened, his numbers improved. There's a science to this. When we connect with others in meaningful ways, our bodies release oxytocin, the hormone of bonding and safety. Oxytocin helps lower cortisol, calm inflammation, and support better metabolic function. It literally makes us more resilient. In a world where health can feel overwhelming, community brings perspective. It reminds us that we're not alone in the questions, the setbacks, or the small victories. I've learned to lean into this, to share more openly, to ask for help, to celebrate with others, not just in private. And I've seen firsthand how that shift from isolation to connection can move the needle more than any supplement I've ever taken. As we approach the final part of this journey, I want to bring everything full circle. Let's step back and see the bigger picture, not just the hacks, but the heart behind the healing. If you're still here, reading or listening, I want you to know something you've already started healing. Because just the act of paying attention, of showing up for your body with curiosity and care, is the first and most powerful step. This journey we've taken together wasn't about finding a quick fix or chasing perfection. It was about peeling back the layers, understanding how food speaks to your cells, how stress shapes your hormones, how sleep repairs more than just your energy, how movement isn't punishment, it's communication, how emotions, community, and grace are not soft concepts, but biological realities that shape your glucose, your resilience, your life. I didn't share all of this because I had it all figured out. I shared it because I've walked this road too. I've been confused, discouraged, exhausted, and I've also been surprised by what works, by how small changes ripple out into big ones, by how capable the body is of responding when we stop fighting it and start listening. Maybe today, you'll add a little more fiber, or drink water before your meal, or take a deep breath when stress tightens your chest. Maybe you'll forgive yourself faster, or say yes to that walk with a friend. Whatever it is, let it be small and honest and yours. Healing is not a test, it's a practice, and you don't have to do it alone. I'm honored to be part of your journey, and I hope, truly, that this story becomes part of yours, because you're not broken, you're not behind, you're becoming. And that, to me, is the most powerful kind of transformation.